suffered at one time or the other. Now, whether you call it a disruption, I do not know, but it certainly disrupted our efforts because we realized that we do not have to just project the Indian writing abroad, but also to fight against prejudices, and which were many. We signed agreements with every publisher around here, giving them certain rights to market our books in their countries, agreed countries, and we maintained our interest in books, in distributing them in Southeast Asia and other developing countries. At one stage, there was an American publisher who took almost every book that we published, and we gave them their imprint for distribution in North America only, not in Europe, because in Europe we had other arrangements. So I think we faced a lot of problems, and today, when I see everyone gathered here and realize that everyone is using new technologies, we have ourselves gone into e-books. We have not progressed beyond the e-books, but we do e-books and still publish STM material. So my question, my statement to you all is that please have perseverance, whatever you do, and you will ultimately succeed. Thank you very much.
Before I start, I wanted to thank a few people. I was very moved yesterday to receive the award that I did. There are a lot of people to thank. If my name is on the door, it's actually what goes on behind the door that contributes to Wiley's success. And I wanted to point out Vikas Gupta and our colleagues. We have a very, very creative publishing operation here. I walked in the room on the first day of the meeting, and there were two graduates of Wiley who have started their own businesses, so they contributed over many years. So there have been a whole host of people. My parents came here in the 60s when we started. They loved India. They spent a lot of time here. And I wanted to recognize these people. And when I received that reward, that's what went through my mind, that it was really their work that built the foundation that we started here in the 60s. I also want to thank the IPA for asking me to address this group. I'm going to go in a slightly different direction than Michel's gone. He asked me to talk about 211 years of disruption. I said, how much time do I have? And he said 10 minutes. So there are some constants here in terms of disruption. For a family business, it's generational transition, so we almost failed, but that was in the 19th century. Piracy has been a constant. I should remind everybody that Americans were very adept at pirating, particularly English and Scottish literature in our early years of publishing. So it's not a phenomenon that's characteristic of a certain part of the world. It's a phenomenon that's characteristic of countries as they develop. Michel's talked about free content. We should probably talk a little bit more about that. I don't know that this is a disruptive factor, but it's certainly an epic shift, an epic market shift, and that is something that's been mentioned here a number of times, and that's the transfer of knowledge from west to east, which was very characteristic of what happened up until recent years. So you look to the advanced economies, so-called, in the United States and England to produce the content, which was then sent overseas to the developing countries. And Mr. Mehra was referring to the kinds of prejudices were associated with understanding the amount of creativity and intelligence and interesting research work that was being done in India that wasn't taken account of. And I haven't heard that was a Wiley warehouse. I certainly hope it wasn't. It could have been. And then, so what we're seeing today is this epic shift where the rapidly growing economies are represented by India and China. They're growing rapidly and also producing world-class research at a very high rate. And the other disruption that we've talked a lot about is technology. I call it the roller coaster ride, or the 3 a.m. wake up, where I wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning and go, oh my God, what are we doing now? And can we do it successfully? And then I don't go back to sleep. But the other aspect of the roller coaster ride is the opportunities created by disruption. So I want to talk a little about how we're responding to it, because it's not just an STM response, it's a generalized response. And so it was very important to come here and hear that the Indian government's very focused, as the Singaporean government, as the Chinese government, many governments, on skills development and workforce development, major themes globally. It's also a theme in the United States because we have our own challenges. That's why we have so many Indians working in Silicon Valley, because we're not producing the talent locally. I wish somebody would explain that to the president, but I don't think he can handle it. Our approach to the research world really starts with education, which is why we came to India to begin with. And we're looking at a situation in which we've had to rapidly transform our business from a very traditional publishing house where we came along with a textbook and we went to a physics professor who had a class and we said, here's your textbook, enjoy it, I hope your students learn a lot, to a situation in which we create an interaction with the customer himself or herself to understand what the specific needs are of the student. So think of the student as the future researcher. And so we are very focused on how do we create academic experiences and the subject areas of the future. So certain subject areas of the future have been clearly identified in these discussions and by the Indian government, by the research community, and they are AI and data security and data analytics and their whole series of robotics. There are a whole series of subject matters. So do we have curriculum in that area? Somebody asked the question, is there an AI journal? I don't know, do you have an AI journal? We couldn't identify.
Yeah, Elsevier does. Yeah.
You do? Yeah, we couldn't identify many AI journals. So the first thing is to ground the student in the academic background in a way that's responsive to the way the economy is growing. And then to make sure that when the student progresses toward the lab, that we understand the student in a kind of a continuum. And by that I mean that the student is well-grounded in the subject matter that's connected to the research that's connected to the future of the Indian economy. And then our notion is that we're more than just a publishing company in a traditional sense focused on quality content and the right content, but we're also focused on the continuum from the undergraduate experience to the graduate and postdoctorate experience, so that when the researcher gets in the lab, the researcher has a grounding in the subject matter and also knows the experience of preparing his research to be published and then making sure that it's being disseminated globally. So we think of what we're doing in this kind of, we call it a career arc. It applies to educational experiences as well. We're very focused on, and we are very focused on here, enrolling out pilots in getting students through the educational experience and when they have an engineering degree, to make sure that when they have an engineering degree that there is a connection between the engineering experience and the job needs of the Indian engineering community. So it's a very different conception of publishing than what we were used to in the past. It's an exciting one. It means a kind of a lifetime connection. It's the old lifelong learning concept that we actually fooled around with in the 1980s and fell flat on our face trying to implement this. But it's that notion of understanding the needs of a community like India and understanding that India is increasingly at the forefront of research, and that India needs not only to be to have access to the best journals with the best research so that they are parts of the global communities that are developing solutions, and also to make sure that we're supporting Indian journals if they need to be started in certain areas. So that's a little bit different way of thinking about this. The thing that I think concerns me, both in the United States and here and many other places that I've been, is there's one more disruptive factor that we really need to take into account, and that's called global warming, and it's the ultimate disruptive factor. So if we cannot focus our education, our research, our workforce, and our political policies on global warming, it's an end game. And so I think, again, this is a laboratory. All countries are in different ways, but this is a very important laboratory for understanding the forces of sustainability and the key types of research, which are very old-fashioned in a sense, because they're food, water, clean air, and health. And these are very essential areas that we should not overlook in the process of going for the high-tech options that are offered by very advanced research. So blending the two of those and trying to sustain not only the workforce in the research community, but our lives, I think, are very important focuses for us in these days. So I want to thank you again for having me. And
great, thank you, Peter. Sanjeev, can I give you the floor? If you have slides, it's to the right.
Good afternoon, and right at the outset, I think I have two challenges already. To be speaking after two or three real statesmen of our industry, and to be able to say something which is still useful after a leisurely afternoon, after lunch. And the other challenge is that I am still old-fashioned, so I still need a reminder system, so I have a few transparencies to go through. I won't exactly stick to the text, because I've been thinking while my senior colleagues have been speaking here and wondering whether disruption is a negative word or a positive word. Destruction definitely is a negative word, but maybe disruption gives us an opportunity to innovate and also to recreate something which otherwise somebody else might do and destroy us. So I think it's more of a wake-up call within the STM business. And it's not that we've been challenged only in the advanced or global or European and US markets. I think within India, which I will give you one or two examples from my personal experience, through a few cricket kind of googlies, you know, it's the way you turn the ball for people who understand and play cricket at you, in the nature of disruptive ideas, and one has had to deal with it. So maybe disruption and evolution is two sides of the same coin. And I guess adapting to the new world, the change, sensing where we're going, possibly is an integral part of doing business in the future and today. Just running over a few facts, very, very pertinent to the STM industry as we see it, is our long histories. Wiley, over 200 years in business. Springer originated in 1842, Elsevier also a couple of decades later, have displayed a great resilience and strength in terms of being able to understand its readers over a long period, sense what exactly is it that they need, and evolve continuously. We survived the wars, So there were disruptions of those nature in the past. It wasn't that our history was not challenged. We also had to evolve to new technologies. The internet hit us hard. I don't think as a business we ever thought that we would have to change and evolve so much and completely reinvent ourselves in the business when it all happened. And if we look back, maybe a few decades, 3 decades, 4 decades, when maybe I came into the industry, is the business the same? No, not at all. It's completely different. The kind of people we work with, our colleagues, the different backgrounds, the education that they bring, the skills and the knowledge that we need to run this business is entirely different. So slowly it's been changing, and the STM business has been able to absorb these changes very well and have not allowed it to destroy us, maybe temporarily disrupt us. But we also evolved by becoming more efficient with the technologies, creating new models to suit the need of our customers and authors, and also merging to give it the size of operation to be able to manage these changes throughout historical processes. I think digitization of content has been the biggest disruption that our business has seen, whether it's journals or ebooks. Especially so in ebooks, because I think ebooks also, from a publisher's point of view, was a disruptive initiative where for the first time we presented to the reader content published in the form of books in a database environment. They could buy that in packages. And the response on the other side also has been quite encouraging. Without going into further detail of, I think the speakers before me have already described what are the elements of disruptions that we face. Just looking at it from the ecosystem that we face, what is it that the researcher of today really expects from us? His honest reply, if you really got around to talking to him, would be they don't want to be hassled by reaching out to information on research. There's an ease of access to research that they want. In the world that we live in, there's no waiting period. Whatever we need is immediate. We should also be able to function in communities, because knowledge creation is not a singular process, and many a times we are part of a much larger community moving in the same direction. So portability of content is extremely important to him. And of course, especially no cost, the challenging budgets, and so on and so forth. So if this is the profile of the researcher, then it throws a lot of questions at us. And as an industry, if we need to survive, I guess we have to continually address these challenges and evolve our systems and approaches in a way that it fulfills the need of these people. And if you really think further, this is possibly one of the reasons which makes our customers go to pirated sites. Because the pirated sites offer you all these facilities, including content for free. Well, Springer Nature, I think, has been very, very active amongst our publishing community in embracing many of these disruptions and finding solutions to it. Our core goal is to support research in a way that it advances discovery. And in doing so, we have had to develop technology, services, and training modules to be able to fulfill the needs of our customers today. We never really in the past had an opportunity to be able to teach authors on how to write articles. In India alone, over the last year or so, we've done about 120 author training programs across the country in various high-end institutions and also universities, helping people to be able to write, to be able to contribute to scientific literature so that it gets published in the right form and is seen all over. So this is one example of the adaptability that our customers and researchers are expecting from us. We've also made serious developments in the area of open access. I think Springer was probably amongst the first publishers to announce in 2004 the open choice, wherein we invited articles to be published in our regular subscription journals. And a real step forward, a strong step forward, is when we took towards our commitment to open access was when we acquired Biomed Central, which is now called BMC. Mikhail already mentioned that we are top publisher in terms of gold access. Just to give it a perspective, we publish nearly 80,000 research articles each year in open access, which puts us far ahead of our competitors or the industry that we work in. And we also have made serious efforts to publish open access books. So that's in the future, because it's not just limited to articles, it's also now moving into e-books and open access books. While doing this, we of course have also been fairly conscious of the fact that the research world is moving towards open research and open science. And if that's the way forward, then we have, as a business, to be able to adjust to the needs of these customers. And services like Shared It, where we allow articles to be shared within communities, SciGraph, which opens up the data behind the research in an open environment, and also the analytics. For example, we launched the book Metrics, where this also is, I think, a phenomenal disruption which happened in the business, wherein analytics became very important. Making decisions in the value of what the customer is accessing from you transparent to him, wherein he's able to decide where is the research going, what is it that is being read, and where is the value for money. This has also made us conscious of the fact that while we have aspirations to further our business, simultaneously researchers within institutions also have aspirations to work together to be able to show off or show to the world their research skills and positioning. So opportunities to partner with them has also been one of the elements that one has developed in the STM publishing world to be able to deal with the aspirations of our customers. Of course, technology has played a big role, and a lot of multimedia also becomes part of the offerings today, where videos and interactive content are now no longer elements of could have, but are part of normal functionality. I said we also had challenges in India. I'll just give you two quick examples. I think way back in 2002, 2001, when our libraries suddenly thought of filling in the knowledge divide by going in for electronic journals. During that time, the world was, the publishing world was more print-oriented, and the electronic content that we offered was print plus model, wherein E was packaged along with print. And in India, we got challenged where suddenly the negotiators asked us to provide them E-only access. And you know, your reaction had to be a shock at how can you just give it away without a subscription base or connect to the print world. But listening to customers and adapting and evolving ways of reaching content in the way that they want has been an important element of managing the disruptions that we have seen. Similarly, when we started to publish and partner with the academic societies here to publish their journals, and we realized that, well, the initial discussions went well, and suddenly we were confronted with their philanthropic intent already recorded in their preamble that their articles will be made freely available. And there was no such model in the world where you could have two versions of the same article, one available through a subscription process and another in an open access environment. But these are all lessons that we learned, adapted to, and evolved. I think I'll step
Sanjay,
here
this is
and maybe
the last
leave-
slide?
I'm sorry?
Is this your last slide?
I just said, I think I'll stop here.
Perfect.
So,
Very well.
so I could sense Mikhail was looking at me sternly, so time to stop.
Great, thank you so much.
We started a little bit late, so I think we can go a little bit longer. And I would like to open the floor for questions. You have incredible brain power here. People feel to kind of agree with each other, so maybe you can ask some questions so we have a little discussion also among the panelists. I see a hand going up there. Oh, sorry. The one in there, we're in the middle, yes? The microphone is coming towards you. We'll start with the gentleman more in the center. Oh. Okay, you're next. Noted. Go ahead.
My question is for you, Dr. Coleman.
Oh.
My name is Salil Bose. I'm a managing editor with Sage.
Yes.
Interestingly, you talked about conservative scientists not really knowing being skeptical about publishing in open access. Is the International Publishers Association doing anything in terms of its outreach to make these conservative scientists a bit more liberal?
It's a very good question. So the IPA is an umbrella organization of PAs, but we do have a dedicated sister organization, which actually is a daughter of ours, called STM. And of course, this is really exactly their area. And I know that many, many individual publishing houses, and I think all of us represented here, we also invest very much in promoting open access. So what I heard, what we do, for instance, on the side of workshops for authors. So how can authors publish even better articles or be even more successful in the peer review process? Now we do this also in the framework of open access publishing.
Thank you.
Maybe other panelists want to add something on this topic?
Yeah, I heard Sanjeev also talk about doing author training courses in India. Does that also involve making them more aware of what open access environment is all about?
Yes, of course, because even as a business model, which is an APC, author pays, author processing, article processing charge model, within the publishing world, I think it's also the fastest growing business for us. You know? So naturally, we are happy to talk about open access, open science, open research, and see if we can build a model which we can sustain and also is commercially viable.
Thanks.
Thank you. Let me go over to the gentleman right there. Go ahead.
Good afternoon to all. I'm Chandra, founder of JCF Corp, a UK publishing house. Introduction about me is inevitable because my questions based on my introduction. I'm a small publishing publisher. I have about 10 journals. Many of my journals, almost 4 of journals are indexed by Clarivate, PubMed, Medline, and 2 of my journals got impact factor as well. I own these journals, and few of the journals what I publish has, partly owned by me. And yes, my question to the eminent panelist and also to the chair, I request you to answer me not on behalf of your companies because you are competitors, as on behalf of my fellow delegates here. Can I survive in this industry with big publishers like you? My first question. Because I have seen a lot of competition from these guys. See, even I have, Clarivate index journals, I get a lot of submissions from everywhere. Still people asking me a lot of questions, are you a good publishing house or a bad publishing house? Hope everyone knows about this if you are from STM industry.
Shall we tackle that question immediately? I think it's a very good one. And I'm very happy that I'm the chair and give it to the panelists. So, Peter, you are, own a chunk of the market. You're a big player.
We've talked quite
Is
a
the
bit.
room also for smaller players?
I think there is, and I hope there is, and I hope they are originating here. I assume you've made a very careful analysis of the road weight opportunity and the risks associated and what you need to scale up. And in our conversations, I see you're creating new journals, you're creating open access journals. I think one of the biggest challenges, or the key that it's such a basic theme in this conference is who has the best content. And if you have the best content, and then you do have the financial backing, however you're going to get it, that allow you to proceed, and that you're very smart about getting access to the technology that you need, which you probably do not need to build yourself, but should be able to get it at an increasingly reasonable price, you have a chance. It's a difficult thing to do because we do have I guess you would call an oligopolistic situation, which I am part of in the research world, and I think this also is connected to the issue of which Mr. Mayer raised, is this a center of Indian publishing enterprises, and are you at the forefront of it, that should be getting the support internally because you have an extremely wealthy community in the sci-tech world? What can you do to connect with the people who could fund what you're doing? And there's, I understand there's sort of a flow back from Silicon Valley. People have been very successful there. They want to build out India. Are they going to come and build out India's publishing capacity? And
Yeah.
my own personal belief is there's enough room for all of us, and I think there's particularly room for the next generation of publishers because you are going to be more closely attuned to the realities of a changing workforce and a changing research flow. There are issues around who controls the uses of research funds and what I would call the geriatrics of research funding, where the older generation is quite reluctant to hand over the funds to the next generation. But I know some people were working on this issue in the United States. But I've been so intrigued talking with you about what you're doing, and I wish you the success
Yes.
that you deserve.
I'm very much glad about that. And, to my publishing house, I get 99% of article submissions from around the world, and I unfortunately get only 1% submissions from India. And we are marketing much from Canada or maybe from American area.
Great, there's a growth market for you. I will go to Richard Charkin,
Thank
our
you so much.
former IPA president, who has also been very active in the world of STM publishing, and always has a fresh perspective. Richard.
Well, thanks for the introduction. Firstly, to answer your question another way, the joy of the STM business is that the success of the big guys means you've got a ready market to sell the company when you get round to doing it. So that would be very good. Secondly, and a little bit more worrying, and this is addressed to all of you, do you think that the world of scholarship, researchers, and indeed the world of librarians think that they are getting good value for the money they are spending with publishers? And is that the cause of some of the disruption?
I think excellent question. And I go first to the panelists. Sanjeev, I think maybe you want to dive in here. And afterwards I'll ask Mr. Mehra.
The librarians today, Richard, have acquired a new role. They are the business negotiators. So whether we fulfill their negotiating aspirations, I don't know. But I guess if it all boils down, as Mr. Wiley said, about to good content, and if your content is well tested and integrity to it and delivers value to the researcher, I guess the librarian will find a way of paying for it.
Mr. Mehra, your perspective, and then Peter.
I personally feel that the author today is becoming very smart. He knows exactly where he wants to go, where he wants to publish, and what he wants to publish. So I think there is a time and a place where you can talk to him and convince him whether you have the best product to project what he writes or not. Thank you.
Very good. I see that we're running out of time, so I wanted to thank again all the panelists. And thank you for your great questions. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, sir. That brings us to the end of the session, which was entitled STM Publishing. And now to present mementos to the esteemed speakers, may I invite on stage Mr. Naveen Gupta to kindly do us the honors of presenting a memento to the esteemed speaker, Mr. N.K. Mehra. Meanwhile, may I invite on stage Mr. Pranav Gupta to kindly present a memento to the esteemed speaker, Mr. Peter Wiley. To present a memento to Mr. Sanjeev Goswami, may I invite on stage Mr. Ramesh K. Mittal. To present a memento to Mr. N.K. Mehra, may I invite on stage Mr. Naveen Gupta. And thank you, esteemed Chair. Dr. Coleman, you have already received the memento. Thank you so much for taking us through this session. May I request you all to please take your seats back in the audience. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if it was my hand, I would not go for a coffee break, but I know you're all waiting for it. It's time to go for our break, and we shall be back at 4 p.m. sharp for the next session. But please do remember, for those of you who are going for the Agra trip, please do not forget to join us for the breakfast at 6:30 a.m. I'm being told to repeat this at every possible chance which is available to me so that people remember to get up in time tomorrow morning. Thank you, and join us back at 4 p.m. sharp for the next session. Thank you. As you can see, our session chair is here with us along with the esteemed speakers. Let's put our hands together and let's welcome them all on stage. Chairing this session is Ms. Ana Maria Cabanellas. She is Vice President, CADRA, IPA Past President, Argentina. The panelists for this session are Ms. Caroline Morgan, Chief Executive and Secretary General, International Federation of Reproduction Rights Organizations, Belgium, Mr. Michael Healy, Executive Director of International Relations, Copyright Clearance Center, ISA, USA, Mr. Kevin Fitzgerald, Senior Advisor, Copyright and Creative Industries, WIPO, Switzerland, and Mr. Rohit Kumar, Consultant, Indian Reprographics Rights Organization. A very warm welcome to all the esteemed speakers and the esteemed chair. Before we start the session, a brief introduction. Ms. Ana Maria Cabanellas began her career as a lawyer and notary after studying at the Universidad Nacional de Buenos Aires. After working several years in a law firm, she joined the family-owned publishing company, Editorial Helasta, as a partner, and in 1979, Ms. Cabanellas became president of Editorial Claridad, which specializes in legal dictionaries as well as fiction, philosophy, and history. It was in 2006 Ms. Cabanellas founded Una Luna, which publishes children's books. She has written several books and frequently collaborates on updating legal dictionaries. It's over to you, Madam Chairperson, to take the session forward.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I want to thank the International Publishers Association and the Federation of Indian Publishers for organizing this Congress and for inviting me to chair this session, but especially for having a session about collective rights management. Collective rights management and reprographic rights organizations are part of the many publishing activities in which I am and have been engaged for a very long time. Collective rights management is almost as old as copyright law itself. The first collecting society was founded in France in 1777 for the use of dramatic and literary works in theater. The first collecting society and collective rights management in music was established in France in 1850 in France. When we talk about publishing, we don't go so far away. One of the most important advancements for authors and publishers in recent decades, reproduction rights organizations had their explosive development worldwide during between 1980s and the 1990s. They are a stunning example of the power of collective action in response to the challenges of technology. In 1988, IFRA became a formal federation. Today, we have a panel that's going to speak about collective rights management and our roles, about the work they have today, and they will take us from a general view to a more singular point of view and from an international point of view to a local point of view. The panelists here, and I will present them in the order they are going to speak, are Kevin Fitzgerald, Caroline Morgan, Michael Healy, and Rohit Kumar. Please receive them with an applause. Mr. Fitzgerald is a director at WIPO, the United Nations Specialized Agency for Intellectual Property. He joined WIPO some 3 years ago, and until recently was responsible for copyright infrastructure. He has now joined the cabinet of the Director General. Previously, he was chief executive at the United Kingdom Copyright Licensing Agency, where his leadership delivered a 50% increase in sales. He also led the setting up of regulation for the collective management sector in the United Kingdom. Kevin was chair of the IFRO's European Group and a director of the IFRO board. He held several roles for the United Kingdom Foreign Commonwealth Office, and he was awarding a CMG in Her Majesty's the Queen's Birthday Honours in 2013 for services to his country. We also have Caroline Morgan. She is the Chief Executive and Secretary General of the International Federation of Reproduction Rights Organization since November 2016. Previous to that, she was the General Manager of Copyright Agency, responsible for managing Copyright Agency's relations with licensing clients, including education and government sectors. Caroline also managed VisCopy, the Australian collective management organization for visual arts. She has also been president of the Copyright Society of Australia, chair of the International Federation of Reproduction Rights Organization of the Asia Pacific Committee, and chair of the Legal Forum. She is deeply involved in the work, or she has been, and she still is, deeply involved in the work of the IFRO community. She was also consultant to the Asia Pacific Cultural Center of UNESCO project on copyright and intangible cultural heritage. The third speaker is Michael Healy. Michael is the Executive Director of International Relations at Copyright Clearance Center and is based in New York. Prior to joining CCC, Michael was Executive Director of the Book Rights Registry and previously Executive Director of the Book Industry Study Group. Before moving to the United States, Michael worked for more than 20 years in the publishing industry in the United Kingdom, spending most of that time in senior editorial, sales, and distribution roles in digital publishing. For much of his career, Michael has been closely involved in the development of standards for the international book trade. He has been chairman of the International ISBN Agency, a director of the International DOI Foundation, and he led the International ISO committee that developed ISBN 13. Well, I think I lost a little bit of your CV, I'm sorry. And last but not least, we have Rohit Kumar. He is replacing Mr. Sudhir Malhotra. So I have to thank you especially to having been able to come here today. Rohit Kumar is the managing partner of Guiding Star Digital Publishers, as well as its Silicon Valley step-down subsidiary Chapter Apps. The focus of his companies is to build and leverage mobile technology platforms for improving productivity for professionals as well as students. Over the last couple of years, the platform Chapter Vitamins Learning Supplements has been adopted by over 20 leading organizations in financial services, insurance, manufacturing, and other industries to train and communicate with over 100,000 learners. Prior to starting his entrepreneurial ventures, Rohit was the MD for South Asia Health Science Division of Red Elsevier, India. He represented Elsevier in the Association of Publishers in India as the president of API, and he was also co-chair of the publishing committee at FICCI and is consultant to the Reprographic Rights Organization of India. Prior to publishing, Mr. Kumar worked primarily in the technology industry for over 15 years at companies such as Microsoft, Oracle, Wipro, and EduComp. He also worked in consulting and Accenture and the Boston Consulting Group. So as you see, we have an exceptional panel, and I'm glad to ask Kevin to start delighting us with his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I've been asked to speak for 15 minutes on a global perspective for economic infrastructure and collective management. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the value and the challenges of the creative industries and the value and the challenges for collective management. So at WIPO, we have actually undertaken a significant study into the creative industries, and the question we have to ask is, are they a suitable industry for government support? And if we look at this first chart, it identifies the percentage of employment arising from the creative industries. And in the Philippines, it's 13%. In the Netherlands, 7.5%. In Russia, 6%. China, 5%. The average across the participating member states was 5.4%. So yes, I would say that the creative industries deserve the attention of government because of the employment which they deliver. Then we look at GDP, gross domestic product. The USA, the contribution of the creative industries is 10%. The Republic of Korea, nearly 9%. And the average was 5%. So absolutely yes, the creative industries can be a significant contributor to GDP. Now let's look at the challenges, and here I have a standard economic value chain across the bottom of the page. We're talking about creation, production, distribution, and consumption. And the principal challenge, I would suggest, to the economic value chain currently is at the distribution part. How do we get value out of the distribution of our works? And I have a quotation for you. Printers have of late taken the liberty of reprinting without consent. Now, this could have been written yesterday or today, but actually that was written in 1710 in the world's first Copyright Act. So the key issue I would suggest in the economic value chain which is challenging us is the global and the digital market. But what can we look at to try and improve our performance in the global digital market? And I would suggest that one area that we could collectively look at, which we could have in common, is to look at identifiers and the types of contracts which can go with them. Because the current situation with digital identifiers, in fact, identifiers in general, is that they're quite haphazard. They've historically arisen over a long period of time, and they are not very joined up in the marketplace. And this is not at all helpful in the digital space, because there are many, many more works than there used to be, and there's been an explosion of low-value transactions. So if there is a digital platform or a digital distributor which is even willing to try and make payments, then it's quite complex and quite costly for them. And of course, we suspect that many don't try to make those payments. So the lack of an efficient identifier network leaves quite a value hole of money which could be flowing back into the creative industries. So what would be the ideal attributes of enhanced digital identifiers? Well, clearly they need to be very interoperable. They need to have formal linkages. They need to be very transparent and easy to use by the public. And obviously they need to clearly identify who the creator or the owner of that given work is. And it would be even better if these identifiers had smart contracts attached to them. So a smart contract is basically a computer protocol which expresses permissions, whether you can copy the work freely, whether you should pay, to whom you should pay, in what circumstances you should pay. And smart contracts can be based on the new blockchain. In addition to the digital challenges with identifiers and smart contracts, there is the issue of legal enforceability, which is currently not working very well. But quite clearly, this is an area for collaboration across the publishing industry, which could be for everybody's benefit. And as a bit of a segue into my conversation about CMOs, CMOs have a huge amount of data about the owners of copyright works. And so CMOs could potentially play a highly collaborative and indeed possibly a leadership role in improving this space for the entire publishing industry. Moving on then to collective management, it's quite difficult to get figures for the value of collective management. I'm guessing it might be worth about 20 billion euros. So that's 20 billion euros of money that flows back into the creative sector. But the good news is, a report published quite recently by CSAC identified that their collections, at least, have been rising over the last 3 years, and last year in particular, it rose by 6%. So the sector is certainly holding up. I've identified 3 challenges which I want to talk about for CMOs, and the first of those relates to developing countries in particular, but it also relates to developed countries. And the particular point that I want to make is that policymakers respond to evidence, and in particular, they respond to economic evidence. And I've listed here 3 fairly useful reports which can be dipped into if you are a developing country and trying to persuade your government about the benefits of collective management, or you're a developed country and trying to defend your position for collective management. In particular, there are 2 rather specific examples which have been powerful in their specific countries. So the first extract here relates to publishers, and it comes from the UK, a Price Waterhouse report. And Sage Publications, identified to PwC that their income from collective management was basically equal to the amount they invested in digital publishing. And this was the case for many other publishers interviewed by PwC. So when this argument was put to the UK government, they realised that not only would the removal of collective management income jeopardise the growth of these innovative businesses and reduce the amount of tax they ultimately paid to the Exchequer, but actually because many of them, and Sage in particular, were education publishers, it would also reduce the innovative products that they were able to deliver to the education sector and would therefore impact negatively on the quality of education outputs. And one other quite specific example from Finland. There was a survey last year, a survey published last year of 2016, in which authors' income was analysed. And if you add together the collective management element of reprographic licensing and public lending right, both of which are managed by CMOs, the percentage of income coming from collective management to authors was nearly 30%, which is very significant. The second area which policymakers can be interested in and can be influenced on is cultural relevance. And I came across a really interesting story from Australia quite recently, where there was the possibility of putting forward amendments to copyright law which would potentially impact negatively on collective management. And this was an open letter written to the government, very surprisingly from this long list of teaching associations. Now, in many parts of the world, teaching associations are against collective management because it costs them money. However, in Australia, the argument was very cleverly made, and I've expanded part of the letter here, to suggest that Australian children should be able to grow up inspired and entertained by local stories, local culture, and most importantly, locally produced educational materials. Moving on to regulation, well, collective management is a fairly natural monopoly, and in many places it's a legal monopoly. And there are positive aspects to that, one of which is it's very clear for consumers where to go to buy the license. Another is it's a very economic way of managing the collection of income and distributing it, and it also reduces the scope for disputes amongst rights holders. So there are many advantages to this monopoly situation. However, of course, being a monopoly puts an extra importance on transparency and good governance. IFRO, CSAC, and other organisations have some very good guidelines for suggesting how transparency and good governance should be managed. But there are many governments around the world who want to regulate, and this can be a positive thing. So we at WIPO have prepared a toolkit which begins with legislation and regulation and then looks at transparency and governance within CMOs. And it's a draft which we published about 2 weeks ago. It's out for consultation with member states and with stakeholder organisations. So I would encourage you to take a look, to give us feedback. But ultimately, this is going to be usable by member states and by CMOs as literally a toolkit you can dip in and take out elements that are useful to you from all of the global examples. And the final comment I was going to make about CMOs relates to digital. And we've undertaken quite a bit of research in this area at WIPO. And the several elements which we have found to be absolutely essential for young people are, for any digital model, any digital licensing model, it should be accessible, it should be affordable, and it should be making the content simultaneously available across all markets. This is especially important for music and film. But if these elements are not present in the proposed business model of CMOs or indeed of content creators, then young people will simply find a way around the business model and break it. They are quite willing to pay if these characteristics are fulfilled, but they will be unwilling to pay if they are not. So, in summary, what have I said? Firstly, that there is a potential positive economic impact on the value chain if we work together on identifiers and smart contracts. Secondly, the biggest impact on policymakers is delivered by providing them with robust evidence. Thirdly, the reputation and impact of CMOs is very well served by having good regulation and good governance. And finally, digital business models must be simple, accessible, affordable, and simultaneously available across all markets. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. That was a very clear presentation. So now I will ask Caroline.
Hello everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you this afternoon. I found the last couple of days stimulating and interesting, and I'm already finding this panel very interesting, Kevin. I wrote down those 3 points, and I'd like to have a little chat with you about it afterwards. Today I propose to talk a little about IFRO, who we are, what we do, and then to turn to the impact of publishing on copying on the publishing industry. And when I talk about copying here, I'm not talking about piracy, unauthorised copying of whole books. I'm talking about the type of copying that goes on every day in schools and universities and office places. A copy of a newspaper article here, copy of a chapter of a book for a really bright student who might be reading ahead in another class. The type of copying that forms the fabric of so many of our institutions. I'm going to focus a little on universities because I know that that's been a topical issue here in India, and then talk about how copyright collective management works in the publishing sector. And I promise I'll do all of that in about 10 minutes. Firstly, IFRO. We have 99 RRO members, so members that are collective management organisations, in 80 countries. Now, don't fret too much about the fact that it's not the same number of organisations and countries. I know in India you have a model where there is one collecting society per category of rights. That's not the case in many other countries. In other countries, they'll have different collecting societies representing authors and publishers, operating in different geographical areas, serving different markets. So that's why we have different numbers of societies as members and different numbers of countries that they're active in. So what I did in preparation for this panel is I wanted to have a look at how successful the collective management organisations were in countries that were India's major trading partners. Now, I did some fairly scientific research, which was I Googled India's major trading partners, and Wikipedia gave me this extremely useful list. I can't tell you whether they're importers or exporters. I find it surprising that Belgium's on the list, but France is not. I wonder if that's because Indians like chocolate. But it's as good a starting point as any. Now, of the 20 major trading partners that India has, there are active RROs in 14 of them, and this is the total collections by those RROs last year. And I just want to point to 2 of them. India's not on this list. Let me just tell you that the domestic collections in India last year were around 7,000 euros, total collections are about €500,000, just to put them in context. I'd just like to point to Singapore and Hong Kong because there's something interesting about both of those territories in this region. The RROs in those countries were formed exactly the same year as IRRO, and they are both delivering, consistent with their size, significant returns to the authors and publishers in those countries. In fact, our Singaporean member class has just celebrated the milestone this year of returning $20 million US dollars to the publishers and authors of Singapore over its life. And I think it's important to stress this economic moment because there are 2 things about the dollar figures that I've got here that I think is notable. The first is that these go straight to the authors and publishers' bottom lines. There's no cost of collection, it comes to you as it is. And the second thing is harking back to what I said right at the beginning. This is money that otherwise would have been left on the table. These are collections for the odd, isolated instance of use in an educational institution, in a government, or in a business. So this is a really valuable, different source of revenue for the authors and publishers. And I think, as Kevin said when he talked about global collections, it amounts to a significant sum of money going straight in to enable authors and publishers to create new products, like the Sage Publications example that Kevin just gave. But of course, and this is my summary of the situation comparing India with the trading partners. And to me, it says something that is wrong with the situation in India. And I know we've had a legal case here, And I know that there's been a lack of compliance in the educational market. And I do think that there is a need for some positive action to restore India to a place on that list that it should have and that the authors and publishers of India deserve. The only countries with lower collections on the list are China, Nigeria and Indonesia. And there are active plans in each of those countries to increase collections. There are also, if I may say, because I see some people in the audience, in the 6 countries that are not on the list, there are active campaigns in 2 of them to establish RROs, in Malaysia and in the UAE. So that list will grow over coming years, and I do hope the collections by IRRO also grow. But of course we know that the value of our industry, the publishing industry, is not just its economic value. Kevin mentioned that in his presentation. I'd like to focus on the question of cultural value and pick up the slide about the Australian teachers and why did Australian teachers side with collective management organisations. And I was strongly taken by a presentation on the first day that referred to a TED talk called The Danger of a Single Story, someone in Africa. And that resonated very much with me because when I was growing up, all the stories were from the Northern Hemisphere. If you guess my accent, I'm from Australia. And we have black swans, we don't have white swans, we don't have snow. So the context for all these stories was quite alien to me, and I found it difficult to identify with those children in the stories. But over the 70s and 80s, the Australian government put a lot of effort into building a domestic publishing industry. And from that example that Kevin gave, those teachers are my peers. They're children that grew up without local content, but now they can see in the classroom the value it has for the children that they are teaching. And that's why they support collective management in Australia. And I think it's a strong lesson for everyone that really your teachers, the teachers in your country, are the best friends of collective management. But I'll keep going. I promised 10 minutes, so let me work through this. I think I've already said that. Copyright, copying and publishing. Books, physical content and digital content, newspapers, journals, used very widely in education and library. If you have an efficient licensing sector, that money gets back into the hands of authors and publishers. And to have a collective management organisation, and my last slide will be to talk about innovation in collective management. You have a tool in your publishing industry that you can use when lobbying government to talk about paid exceptions and licensing as an alternative to more free uses. And you have a body that you own. The authors and publishers in most of these countries own the collective management organisation as a membership body, and you can develop business models for them that solve problems that you're facing in your business. Typical copying in universities, we all know this, the course packs, hard copy, learning management systems and digital use. And in my experience, and I worked previously in the collective management organisation in Australia, there's a rapid shift to digital in universities in terms of reuse and licensing. Not so much in schools, but it will happen. And the collective management organisations need to be able to license digital uses in education. And in the session before this, we talked a bit about disruption and transformation. I think it's important in this context when we're talking about educational licensing, educational use, the education sector is being disrupted as well, not just us. There's increasing use and reliance on digital uses and digital content. There are new ways of using and sharing content in educational institutions. And there's the globalisation of education services. And we need to respond to all of those changes. Now, in terms of globalisation of education services, let me give you a practical example. There's an educational, a management university called SP Jain. They have a branch in Australia, they have a branch in Singapore, they have a branch, I think, here in Mumbai, and they have one in Dubai. And in both Singapore and Australia, they pay licence fees. The course content they use is covered by collective management licences. But in Dubai and here in India, those courses are not licensed. They use the same content, but it's not being paid for. And I think that's the globalisation of education services being in the place where we can provide a single licence for a single institution operating in several countries is one of the next horizons. Yes, we license in education, government, trade and industry. Let me put your fears at rest about a land grab by collective management organisations. This is the copyright balance slide we always use in talking to lawmakers. The biggest, the most important, is the primary market, the market that the publishers and authors exploit themselves, and with self-publishing, many authors are exploiting that directly. The place for exceptions to copyright written in legislation is very, very small. How do you bridge the gap between these two? You bridge it by putting in place RRO licences of secondary uses. And I believe that that is not just the responsibility of industry. There's a public interest in making sure that school teachers can access the content that they want legally. They are community leaders. They have a responsibility to model ethical standards of conduct. They shape children's aspirations and their values. And if they are copying and not paying and using content without paying, then it doesn't matter how many IP respect courses schools undertake, because they are seeing every day that actually this is just lip service. So to me, it's extremely important that there is a collective licence in place for education. It's in their interests, not just in ours. I'm not sure if I need to spend a lot of time here telling you how RROs work. You're a fairly sophisticated audience. I'm sure you're all members of IRRO or the collective management organisation in your country. It's pretty simple, and I've left on this table over there a pile of these, which is a leaflet that we put together explaining how collective licensing works and the role of exceptions in education. It was specifically for use in Europe, but I think it's got enough general information for anyone who wants to read more widely, so there's a pile over there if you want to grab one for yourself. And that'll stop me having to talk too much about the detail of operation. It's all here in the slides that you'll see. Let me finish with my last slide, which is about innovation and RROs. So right at the very beginning, I said, you own the collective management organisations. You can adapt and use them for new problems that your industry is facing. And a couple of these new areas where collective management organisations are moving into is managing out-of-commerce or mass digitisation initiatives by libraries, by working very closely with WIPO and the Accessible Books format consortia to prepare accessible format books, to do the licensing of those, to provide across borders to disabled readers, and then the multi-territory licensing that I talked about before, because you have to make it easy for the user. So I think I'll end there, and I look forward to a little discussion later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Every time I hear you, I go back to my RRO. I'm the Vice President of CADRA, the Argentine RRO, thinking I have to find ways to collect more, to distribute more. I hope I do that. Now it's Michael's turn, and I want to add that Michael chairs the International Standard Name Identifier, ISNI agency, and is the director of the UK Copyright Hub. And this international standard name identifier is very useful both for ISBN and especially for the RROs when they have to distribute, because they, like that, know whom are they distributing, especially when in countries like mine, fathers and sons use the same name, the same surname, etc. So, Michael?
Well, Anna, thank you very much for that plug for the International Standard Name Identifier, and thank you very much for the opportunity to join the panel, and thanks, of course, to IPA and FIP. Caroline and Kevin have talked a little bit about the history and success of collective licensing and the collective management of rights. You know, we have decades of experience behind us. We have billions of dollars flowing from licensees to rights holders through the collective management system. Yet the paradox is we find ourselves in, I believe, if not in a crisis right now, in particularly challenging times as far as collective licensing is concerned. So if you want to characterize me, I'm the anxious one in the panel this afternoon. And to some degree, the challenges facing collective licensing, facing collective management organizations, are a reflection of the pressure facing copyright as a whole. And very little more about that needs to be said in an audience, as Caroline said, as experienced and sophisticated as this. But part of the challenge we face, of course, is technological. We're all familiar with social media tools, other technological tools that make the sharing of content, whether legitimately or otherwise, so much easier than in previous generations. You just have to look at the figures for a tool such as WeChat in China or Twitter to show the potential for the distribution of unauthorized content across social media platforms. And the general point I want to make is that we live every day, and the younger generation of users live every day inside these tools that make content sharing easier than ever before. And we also live in particularly challenging political, cultural, and economic times as far as questions around the value of copyright are concerned. Barely a day seems to go by when we don't hear news from a government or some other quasi-governmental agency asking whether the intellectual property frameworks in a particular place, a particular country, are fit for purpose. The value of copyright within the creative economy is challenged, it seems, continuously. I've talked about the technological challenges associated with easy file sharing, easy content sharing. There's certainly a populist demand for reform of copyright, it seems. And certainly when I think back to when I started in publishing more than 30 years ago, the only people who talked about copyright were academics and lawyers. I never heard a commercial leader talk about copyright much as I worked my way through the publishing system. Now everybody's talking about nothing else, it seems, not just at conferences such as this, but in the wider community. And there's a very lively, vibrant debate going on all around the world, not just about the value of copyright, but actually questioning the contribution that copyright makes in economic terms and in social and cultural terms. And whenever a debate of this kind intensifies and magnifies, you can be sure that government interests are going to be involved. And that's certainly true right now. There is an apparently insatiable demand for more exceptions to copyright, more limitations on copyright, greater accountability and transparency on collective management organizations, a good thing, I would suggest. Better licensing mechanisms, because one of our failures, if we're going to talk about market failures in collective licensing, is that it's entirely absent from significant parts of the world. As far as the collective management of rights in publishing is concerned, there is no effective collective licensing today in China. There's none in the Middle East. There's precious little here in India, as Caroline has indicated. There's precious little in Brazil. These are not insignificant economies. These are powerhouse economies in the world, and yet the collective licensing scene is very impoverished as far as the publishing world is concerned in many of these key markets. So, being the anxious one on the panel, I've asked myself whether there isn't this perfect storm right now. We have technology proliferation that enables borderless sharing on a regular basis, which facilitates infringement. We have, I think, a relatively unbalanced public debate in which our value as publishers, our value as collective management organizations isn't heard loudly enough. There isn't, in my view, anything like enough copyright education, enough advocacy for the interests of publishers that we need. There's an extremely low awareness amongst users of what copyright is and the value it brings. And as I mentioned a moment ago, we do not have a ubiquitous, global, properly functioning licensing regime that we really need in the publishing industry, in my view. Francis Gurry, who was with us the other day, has said on previous occasions how important that last point is. And this often repeated mantra of Francis's is, I think, worth repeating again and again. And it boils down to, we have to make licensing as easy as infringement. And we have a long way as an industry to go to reach that point, even though we have decades of successful collective licensing behind us in the publishing industry, and as I say, billions of dollars flowing through that system on an annual basis. So we live in these transformed times, and I said a moment ago, so many governments involved in reviewing copyright and licensing. We've had it in the United Kingdom, we've had it in Australia, it seems to be a perennial favourite in the European Union, and we've had also extremely hostile legislation in many countries, very injurious to the rights of rights holders and publishers, particularly in places like Canada, South Africa, Brazil, and many other places. Again, barely a day goes by when there isn't, if not a review of copyright undertaken, then a new piece of draft legislation that's hostile to the interests of rights holders to be confronted. And when governments aren't trying to undermine us, judges seem to be. I'm not going to go through all of these cases by any means. I just cherry-picked a handful, which you're all familiar with, including the very high-profile case here in India, which I think was very damaging to the prospects of publishing in this country, but also very, very damaging to the prospects of a meaningful collective licensing regime here in India. You might ask yourself, well, who cares? What's at risk? Well, licensing revenues on which publishers have traditionally depended are certainly at risk. And I certainly have the figures to prove that in my own revenue line at Copyright Clearance Centre. And I think collective rights management is at risk unless we address these issues pretty urgently. I don't have many up-to-date figures, but I think Kevin's figure is probably about right, about 20 billion a year. When we last thoroughly collected the numbers back in 2013, about 11 billion was flowing through the collective licensing systems across media on an annual basis, and about $1 billion, or billion euros, should I say, was at that time being collected by reproduction rights organizations for onward transmission to publishers and to authors and other creators. I can give you a much more accurate figure in my own business at Copyright Clearance Centre. In our last fiscal year, we distributed to rights holders about $236 million. So I don't want to suggest for one moment that this isn't a sustainable business line. For us, it is growing, but it would be foolish, I think, not to identify and recognize the tremendous threats posed to this system. In conclusion, we're living through transformation. Copyright is undeniably under threat, and that has been a regular theme, of course, in the last 3 days and throughout the IPA's agenda this year and in previous years. Licensing revenues are declining in many places. If you don't believe that, go and look at the licensing revenue numbers from Canada in the last 5 years, which are falling like a stone and are trending in only one direction, and that direction is zero, I would suggest, unless radical reform is implemented in Canada. And those threats are by no means just local, they are absolutely global, whether it's because of legislative or judicial threats to the collective management system or because of the absence of an effective collective management or collective licensing regime in so many countries. What should we do? Well, we have to continually, as the previous speakers have said, and tirelessly demonstrate the value we bring, not just to the publishing world, but to the wider society. What we do supports research and teaching. What we do enables legitimate sharing of content. It rewards creators, it protects rights, and is highly, highly efficient. We cannot fail for one moment to remind our critics of the tremendous value we bring to the publishing world. We stand between licensees and rights holders, and just in my organization alone, we're selling to more than 30,000 companies, and we have nearly 1 billion rights under management on a voluntary basis from publishers, authors, agents, and many others. And we are all diversifying away from just traditional collective licensing into software management, workflow tools, content delivery, and so on. And we're all very active investors in copyright education, whether it be to individuals, to students, teachers, corporations. We continue to invest as an industry very heavily in that, and we need to do a great deal more, in my view. We have, as Caroline has already said, we really need to innovate beyond our traditional base. There has to be much greater engagement, not just with prospective and existing licensees, but with government and other policy agencies. We must shout more loudly about the value we bring, and we have to be much more effective to realize the ambition that was inherent in Francis Gurry's remark about making licensing ubiquitous, easy, and affordable. That's all I want to say in these earlier remarks, and I look forward to the conversation we're about to have. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks a lot, Michael. And now we would like to hear Rohit Kumar, and he will explain us what's happening in India. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna Maria, distinguished guests on the dais, friends from the publishing industry, and from various stakeholders to the industry. Could we just get these lights off a little bit? Just coming straight in my eyes, or just dim a little bit. I thought I'd share a discussion rather than a presentation, because explaining the issues that we face in India is not as easy to do on a PowerPoint presentation as it is to actually talk about them. So I think, as Caroline mentioned about the challenges that we see in India, they are real, they're very real. So, and I'll explain the situation. Right, for collective rights to really gain traction in a market, there one has to be a respect for copyright or respect for intellectual property. The second thing is there has to be a legal framework and the law that has to support it. And the third is that there obviously has to be an execution around creating that awareness and then selling the licenses and collecting the licenses, so that all the good benefits that Michael had just in his last slide pointed out, of how it supports research, supports it rewards creators, it protects rights. A number of things like this become very important if that exists. Now, like in India, nothing ever works as smoothly as one would think. So in spite of the Copyright Act having a provision, it took a while before the IRRO really got functional. Just as it was getting functional and with support from the CLA and from the from IFRO and the international community, we got hit just that same very year by a court case, which only got announced 1.5 years ago, which was the Delhi University court case. So just when you think everything will start working, something in the legal framework which is there to support collective rights in India, where the industry gets together, the IRRO gets functional, the CLA and other RROs sign reciprocal rights so that the IRRO can get jump-started, we suddenly have a situation where the case becomes larger than life because it starts questioning whether photocopying is legal or not. And then when the court rules that there is leveraging a slight ambiguity in section 52(1)(I) of in the course of instruction, they ruled that students can photocopy, right? Now what that does is, just when we were getting started with awareness workshops, getting started with sensitization around copyright and intellectual property, and this is before India actually came up with a new IP policy just a couple of years ago, that has done more to create a concern in administrators, which quite honestly is one of the most surprising things, because who benefits the most from learning, reading, writing and disseminating copyrighted material? I would argue that the number one beneficiary of it are actually the professors who become the administrators and the principals in different colleges, who have the right to purchase this license, who have the power to purchase the license, and yet they don't want to because they think they're doing something wrong. And I think that mind block that we have in front of us, especially as far as educational licensing is concerned, is probably the single biggest thing that we as an industry have to do in India, which is what the IRRO, with the support of the industry, can do in India. And I think, I'll pause here for a minute and digress from the topic over here, because I've used this very effectively in a few awareness workshops in colleges when I've gone to meet and present to students on the importance of copyright. So the presentation that I give in these institutions is called the knowledge economy. And typically before the presentation, I've had students fill a survey of what are the best jobs that people want to be in. So interestingly, in Delhi University or in any other university in the country, the top names that come up are companies like Microsoft, companies like Google, the Boston Consulting Group, Bain, McKinsey, Pepsi, Coca-Cola. Now what's common in all of these companies is, one, they're not Indian, they're global. Two, all of them have built businesses because of the intellectual property protection that they've enjoyed, not just in their countries, but worldwide. And so the same students who can buy a cup of coffee at Starbucks today in India for the same price as the price of a textbook in India, or even more expensive than a price of a textbook in India. And Starbucks, by the way, is opening a store almost every week now in India. Right? Just giving you a sense of where the disposable income goes. The same students are hesitant to buy a book because they think it's a waste of money, they will not need it after the semester. So therefore they prefer to buy photocopies. And the university rents out the photocopy shop to somebody, makes revenue on it, sees no importance in the value of books themselves, even though people's progression is linked to writing research papers by reading other research over the years that other people have benefited from. So that's the conundrum we face, right? Similarly, what I tell students and I ask students is, where do you spend your money as part of the survey that they do? Interestingly, the number one place where the money goes is these days a mobile phone. And when I ask them which mobile phones do you have, the aspirational phone is obviously the iPhone, right? But then all the other phones that they come up with are either American or Chinese brands. I'm not saying made. Chinese brands. And very interestingly, I asked them, so if China can create global brands, why can't India create global brands? So, and then they're all wondering what happened. You know. The second place where they spend their money is on food and drinks. Right now, legal age, etc., so I will not get into whether students do it, but even in this conference, whether we like to believe it or not, it's not, financially, our industry is not benefiting as much as the hotel and the food and the alcohol industry. So we are creating more jobs in the food and the alcohol industry, which doesn't need people who have a college degree to work in, right? They may be 5% of the people who work in those industries may really need a proper degree. The rest actually learn on the job, become great chefs, or serve in hotels and get, you know, a decent living out of that. But as an industry, they're the ones benefiting from this conference, financially. Like I said, there are multiple other benefits we, as the publishers globally, will benefit from through this conference. But financially, who's benefiting? So, which is what is happening with our students, with our people, with our population, by starving the knowledge sector. We are feeding the alcohol sector, which in India at least, at the state level, at the local level in any state, is run by the mafia, or the equivalent of the mafia for, you know, what we have. So that is what our policymakers need to understand when they say, you need to come up with a better mechanism for the IRRO. The responsibility of the government is to decide which industry do they want to really promote in the country. The knowledge industry or the alcohol industry. And I think that argument has to be made time after time after time for policymakers, for college administrators, for principals, for those who control the budgets, to say, how do we really start getting the awareness of copyright started in our country? Because until that is done, the chart that Caroline presented will never have India on it. And we'd all like India to be very much on that chart. Not because we want to make money. IRRO anyway doesn't make the money. It's the rights holders who make the money. It's the global rights holders. Because a lot of material that will be photocopied is not just Indian. It will be Indian. We have Dr. Avasthi, who's the head of the Authors Guild, along with other members over here. His book is being photocopied shamelessly. And he's powerless because the mindset within the other people in the administration who have to get convinced on it is that they don't see the value in it. And I think that is the challenge we face. We have authors who are facing the challenge, we have publishers who are facing the challenge, and until we start convincing the person who is making the decision, and it has to be done not just by one person, by one organization, by the IRRO, and my appeal is to the entire industry out here, that all of us have a responsibility of creating the awareness around copyright in every potential forum, and really engaging people to understand that it's not about the money. It's about the understanding of the long-term implications of this. If India will be the third largest economy, not just on a PPP basis, but on an absolute basis just in the next 10 years from now in the world, how can we do that without proper understanding and sensitization around intellectual property and copyright? It can't happen. And if you look at the Nielsen report that was published a couple of years ago, which I had the fortunate tenure in my tenure as the president of the API, that the report actually did get published. It says that the Indian book market is bigger than Bollywood. It's bigger than the movie industry. It's not as big as the TV industry, which is actually larger, but it's bigger than the movie industry. And the movies are just getting bigger and bigger because now you're hearing about movies, Indian movies making $100 million equivalent in revenue, which was unheard of 10 years ago. But it's not about the money that they're doing it. They're doing it simply because there is awareness that we have to protect the rights of the creators. We have to incentivize that content creation. And it has to be local content, it has to be local stories. As Caroline pointed out, that's in every country, the local content has to be preserved, created, generated, and as time goes on, that's what has to happen. And I think that is the real challenge for us, that unless we as individuals all realize that we can all afford 1 rupee towards copyright, and maybe, you know, part of it is we have to really start with something like a copyright tax that has to be created for 1 rupee, right? That will start getting people aware of it, but maybe that's, you know, that's just one provocative idea, right? But something like this has to be done, because until the sensitization and the awareness happens, we will not be able to take care of the rest of the things that we have a responsibility as India, not just to India, but to the world. We have, the Indian government has signed bilateral treaties which need to be adhered to. And at the moment, given the interpretation of what the Delhi High Court has done, that puts it up in question, whether those international obligations are even obligations at all or not. And I think that's where the challenge is. But I'm also confident that with the support of the entire industry and all our stakeholders outside India and the partner RROs, that we will be able to overcome this step by step. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rohit. Well, I really think that to have an RRO established in a country and being useful, you need several elements. Some of them have very well been described now by Rohit. I belong to an RRO in Argentina, and I'm the vice president. And in Argentina, we have a legislation that doesn't work at all for an RRO. Our copyright law was written in 1934. Nobody was thinking about RROs at that time. So in order to authorize a copy, whatever copy we are talking about, even a written copy, you need the express authorization of the author and the publisher, which makes very difficult for us to work in the RRO, since we need all the publishers and all the authors to give us power of attorney saying they authorize us to authorize those copies. Also, and going back to Argentina, we need the help of publishers and authors, and convincing publishers to give us these powers of attorneys and to participate in the RRO has been very, very difficult. Nowadays, it's simpler because they've been seeing us work for more than 10 years, and they've seen how that we are transparent, etc., etc. But we need both publishers and authors working together in order to have an RRO working. And also, we need the cooperation of the government. Without it, it's impossible to go further forward. So I would like my panelists to speak very shortly about these 3 subjects. I will ask Kevin to tell us a little bit about what we need in order to have a good legislation. I will ask Michael to speak about publishers and authors working together, and I will ask Caroline to speak very shortly also about what we need from the governments. Please.
Thank you, Anna Maria. So I totally agree with your premise that member states do need to have proper legislation in place. Typically, older copyright acts will make copying a criminal offence unless express permission has been granted. And therefore, provision needs to be made for collective management. In fact, if you come from a member state where the copyright legislation is not providing for that, then you can actually come to WIPO and we're able to provide your government with legislative assistance to help them draft appropriate new copyright laws. And in fact, in similar vein, if your country is not an adherent to the WIPO Copyright Treaty, then we can also provide legislative assistance to your country to adhere to the WIPO Copyright Treaty. A couple of elements which could be useful in such copyright legislation. One is an example from the UK, in fact. It's called the license override. So a lot of legislators like to write exceptions for education, and it's kind of fair enough that in education there should be some sort of an exception. But the clever device which the UK has put in place is if there is a license, then the license must be purchased. So it's called the license override, and that's quite a useful device. And the other useful device which began in Scandinavia is extended collective licensing. And basically that is a device which says if there are an adequate number of members from the class of rights holders who are in membership of the RRO or the CMO, then actually they are able to license for the entirety of the repertoire, even if somebody has not become a specific member. And that's quite a useful device as well, which could be built into copyright legislation covering collective management.
Copyright Clearance Center is obviously working in the United States, and one of the particular characteristics of the American environment is that we operate in an entirely voluntary licensing system. What that means is that every one of the 900 million rights that we have under management today has been mandated to us by a rights holder on a voluntary, opt-in and non-exclusive basis. So everything we do is made possible by the active participation of the rights holder, whether that rights holder is a publisher or an author, or any other type of creator, it doesn't matter. There's no statutory basis to the licensing regime in the US. So now obviously there can be tensions between authors and publishers even in that voluntary environment, but it's remarkably low level of tension, I have to say, because of this opt-in voluntary basis of our operations. We have many, many individual authors represented in our license, again on a voluntary basis, and many, many thousands of publishers. It's a relatively unusual system globally. You know, the Philippines has it, Japan has it, one or two other places have it. But it does, to a great degree, eliminate the tension that you were referring to, I think, in your question, Anna.
I think I've got two comments to make there, and I think the first one is about the public interest. Very often when you're talking to governments around the world, it's very easy for them to say, well, copyright's a private interest. You're private people, go away and deal with your private property. And I think what government don't realise is actually that having a functioning copyright marketplace is in the public interest. In having effective licensing mechanisms for education and schools is in the public interest. And therefore, government support of these activities is necessary. Governments intervene in markets all the time to try and regulate the way that market operates in terms of efficiency and effectiveness. Copyright marketplace for licensing is no different. Michael's talked about the US and commented on how unique it is. I look around the world and there are very few markets for copyright licenses where the government hasn't intervened in some way, shape or form. As Kevin said, in the UK there's a licence override. They're about to introduce one in Kenya for exactly the same reason, to work out what's the relationship between exceptions and licensing so that everyone understands the relationship. So governments regularly intervene. They intervene to do that. They intervene to put in the legislation, how much can be copied. That's recently happened in Germany. Or who sets the fee and who pays it. That's also something governments do. And how are disputes resolved. So I think that governments need to just assume that they will be involved in making the market work effectively. And just, if I could pick up something that Rohit was saying about the situation in India, I'm looking for solutions here. I'd like to just remark on a project that we've been involved in Nigeria. The collective management organisation in Nigeria had stopped functioning for any number of reasons. And a coalition got together involving the Nigerian Copyright Board, because they wanted to have an effective mechanism working in that country, involving WIPO, involving IFRO, and involving other partners. And the idea of that project was just to get a multifaceted way to get that collective management organisation up and running. Kevin and I were both there when they launched their MOU with the Vice Chancellors Association in November, and they are now beginning to sign licences. So it is possible with this sort of multifaceted coalition to get things back on track. And I think that maybe we should explore whether something like that's needed in India. Thank you.
Thank you. Rohit, can you remind us very shortly what the IRO needs in order to work better?
Right. The IRO needs help on three key areas. Number one is on the awareness side, as I mentioned, promoting the importance and sensitization of why copyright is important to the future of the country. Second, it needs help on the policy side from the government to be able to take a very important role in steering this, because the majority of institutions in the country that are the elite institutions where this should actually take place are government institutions. So the government has a very, very important role in that. And the third is actually a commitment and attitude from the different stakeholders. So whether it's the students, whether it is the professors, whether it is the authors, as well as it is administrators. If every government institution where there is an author purchases the license, at whatever price the license is, that will do a lot more for creating awareness than anything else.
Thank you very much. Thank you to my panelists for these last questions. And we have 8 minutes for questions from the floor. I don't see any hands. Well, I want to say that our industry's future depends on us promoting and protecting robustly the intellectual property rights of creators and fighting for those rights in a world that seems determined to weaken and undermine them. Our speakers, to whom I thank very much, and this Congress have sent a clear signal of our collective commitment to fighting for the future of copyright. And before we proceed to leave for the closing ceremony, I would like to profit of this occasion of having a microphone to say one last thing. This is the last session of the Congress, so I want to congratulate, as a participant and as a speaker, the organizers of the Congress. I've been participating in IPA Congresses since 1994, and I was only absent to one, so this is my 12th Congress. I've also helped to organize many of IPA Congresses. So I know that during the organization, you go up and down. You dream of things that you want to do, and then you find they are impossible to be done. And also, not only during the preparation you go up and down, during the Congress, you have many things that you have to solve at the last moment, like, for example, replacing one of the speakers. And the important thing is not what failed, it's not what went well, it's what the public thinks that was if the Congress was good or if it wasn't good. So from the outside, I think this Congress was great. And again, I want to congratulate everyone that was engaged in the organization of the Congress. Thank you very much, and thank you all for attending this session.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, for taking us through this session and making it a very interesting session. And now we will have the memento presentation to the esteemed speakers and the esteemed chair of this session. To do the honors, may I first invite on stage Dr. Ashok Gupta to kindly present a memento to the esteemed speaker, Ms. Caroline Morgan. Thank you, Ms. Morgan, for being a part of this session. Thank you, Dr. Gupta, for joining us on stage to do the honors. We are thankful to Mr. Michael Healy. May I request Dr. S.S. Awasthi to please join us on stage to kindly present a memento. Thank you, Mr. Healy. Thank you, Dr. Awasthi, for joining us on stage to present the memento. We're thankful to our esteemed speaker, Mr. Kevin Fitzgerald. May I request Mr. Pranab Gupta to please join us on stage and kindly present a memento to the esteemed speaker. Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald, for being a part of this session. Thank you, Mr. Gupta, for joining us on stage. We are thankful to Mr. Rohit Kumar. Unfortunately, the original speaker for this session was Mr. Sudhir Malhotra, who, however, due to family emergency, could not join us here today. We're very thankful to Mr. Rohit Kumar for having accepted at the last moment and being a part of this session. And now to present a memento to the esteemed chair, Ms. Anna Maria Cabanellas. May I invite on stage Mr. Vikrant Mathur. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, esteemed speakers. Thank you, esteemed chair. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of this session, which was collective rights management, which brings us to the valedictory function and the closing ceremony. The valedictory function and the closing ceremony will be followed by the dinner and the cultural program. Ladies and gentlemen, a good evening and warm welcome to the valedictory function and the closing ceremony. It's been such a pleasure to host you all for the 32nd International Publishers Congress. And I hope that you have enjoyed being a part of this event as much as we have enjoyed putting it together for you. So without further ado, I now take the pleasure of inviting on stage the organizing committee of Federation of Indian Publishers. Please put your hands together amidst your applause. Please welcome on stage Mr. N.K. Mehra. Mr. Ashok K. Ghosh. Dr. Ashok Gupta. Mr. Ramesh K. Mittal. Mr. Naveen Gupta. Mr. Pranav Gupta. Ms. Monica Malhotra Kandhari. Mr. Himanshu Gupta. Mr. R.C. Govil. And ladies and gentlemen, another name whom we are missing today is Shri Sudhir Malhotra. Not here today because of family emergency. However, he has worked relentlessly to make this Congress a big success. And the entire organizing committee would like to thank the organizing committee of IPA, who have worked steadfastly to make this event a big success. Please put your hands together as I invite on stage amidst your applause, Dr. Michael Coleman, President IPA. Mr. Jose Borginho. Mr. Hugo Setzer. Mr. Hugo Setzer. Please put your hands together for Ms. Joanna Babchinek. Ms. Joanna. And also very quickly, may I invite on stage Mr. James Taylor, amidst your applause. Well, there they are, ladies and gentlemen. The people who are the driving force in making a big success out of the 32nd International Publishers Congress. Mr. James Taylor. Let's have a collective photograph with all of you together. At this moment, we would like to once again thank the IPA for their support and for their kindness, for their generosity, and for bringing the Congress to India. Thank you so much. You gave us this opportunity. We really enjoyed it. Thank you. May I request the entire IPA team to kindly join us back in the audience? And now, ladies and gentlemen, to honor those people who have worked relentlessly behind the scenes and whom we would like to thank here today by presenting a small memento. This by no means is any way, however reminiscent we might be, we can't thank them enough. So we would like to do this small thing in their honor as a token of our appreciation and thanks. Without their contribution, this day would not have been possible. So please join me in applauding on stage as I invite them. The staff who worked relentlessly behind the scenes with the Federation of the Indian Publishers to make this huge event a big success. It's no mean task. So amidst your applause, please join me in welcoming on stage from the staff, Ms. Ramani. I hope you're here. Ms. Ramani, Ms. Ravinder Kaur, Ms. Anu Talwar. Ladies and gentlemen, we see women power. There they are, working behind the scenes. Really thankful for your contribution and your hard work. It would not have been possible without you all. The ladies. That, ladies and gentlemen, is Ms. Ramani. And now joining us on stage, Ms. Ravinder Kaur. That was Ms. Ravinder Kaur, and now joining us, Ms. Anu Talwar. And may I also quickly invite Mr. Jagdish Chand, Mr. Girish Singh Rawat, Mr. Bantu, Mr. Jagdish Jaiswal, Mr. Mohan Singh, and there's one more name which is a surprise on this list. I'm not going to announce it just now. Request you all to please come and join us on stage very quickly. The faces you did not see on stage. Mr. Jagdish Chand. Mr. Girish Singh Rawat. Mr. Bantu. Mr. Jagdish Jaiswal. Mr. Mohan Singh. And ladies and gentlemen, I had stopped after an and that special name requires a very special mention. He has been working non-stop and probably did not get a wink of sleep, but has been managing single-handedly all those aspects of this conference which were assigned to him and may not have been assigned to him. Without being asked, he rose to the challenge, whether it was arranging for a missed transport, or for arranging for a car, or for arranging for a room, or for whatever it might be at the back end or the front end. This man does not say how to say no. For everything, every request, there is a smile and there is a yes, sir. Please put your hands together amidst your rousing applause, please. Mr. Pradeep Chhabra. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chhabra is the star performer who brings that extra edge and who separates the beautiful, well-done event from the brilliantly done ones. All the staff together, please. We are very thankful to the contribution of the entire staff. As you can see, we worked with skeletal staff, but still, they made it all possible. We're very thankful, very honored with all the work that you have done behind the scenes and in front of the scenes. Thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I invite Mr. Naveen Gupta, the man of the moment, to kindly share his views with us. He would like to say a few words.
For me, it's a surprise. Sir, first of all, my thanks to all of you for making this conference a success. I just wish to share just one thing. I have learned a lot. While organizing this, I came across two stalwarts of Indian publishing and maybe international publishing, Shri Ashok Ghosh and Shri N.K. Mehra. And as fatherly figure, these people gave us a lot of love and lot of guidance. I have learned, not me, I think all my younger team, Dr. Ashok Gupta, Mr. Ramesh K. Mittal, Pranav, myself, Monica ji, we people learned a lot from these people, and we just have a token of respect for them just to say our thanks. I'll request all of you to join with me with big applause for them. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, the organizing committee of the Federation of Indian Publishers would like to honor their senior-most members who have been our guiding light and spirit and our mentors. So, can I put it in these words? Maybe the young blood would like to honor their mentors. There they are, ladies and gentlemen, the titans, Mr. N.K. Mehra and Mr. Ashok K. Ghosh. So, ladies and gentlemen, may I request you all to please, let's all stand up and join our hands together in honor of these two stalwarts who have been our guiding light and our spirit. It's been such a learning experience. We could not have had a better occasion to thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, where they say experience makes a difference, I would also like to tell you that the young blood infuses new and beautiful energy into any organization. We have one such name in our midst. He's standing right here on the stage. And personally, it's been an absolute delight to deal with all of them, but this person absolutely stood out from the rest. He has the makings of the leader, a future leader, and I know he's ready to share the bastion with the senior leaders, but today he would like to share a few things. I do not know whether he's prepared to do so or no, but whether you like it or not, here I come. Ladies and gentlemen, the man of the moment, Mr. Pranav Gupta.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm both humbled and proud today to be standing here in front of you. As an Indian publisher, I'm proud to bring IPA Congress to India. As a FIP organizer, I'm proud to pull off this event so successfully. As an Indian consumer, I'm proud of the potential this represents for the Indian readers. IPA Congress 2018 has been a great representative of the grit, the determination, the poise, and the sense of collaboration that represents Federation of Indian Publishers. It wasn't easy. It certainly wasn't easy, but we pulled it off. And I'm sure we pulled it off better than anybody else in the world. And for that, I want to thank the entire organizing committee at the FIP and the entire office secretariat team at the FIP. It's difficult to name everyone who made this event successful. But trust me, if you think you should be named, I'm thinking about you only. Being the youngest of them all, I think it's my solemn duty to ask you for forgiveness for anything that we may have missed or that didn't go as per your expectations. We talked a lot yesterday about the freedom to publish. I think the one point we missed is the ability of consciousness. The freedom to publish comes with an inherent requirement for people to be consciousness. It becomes much truer in the current digital age where everyone is a publisher with no imposed boundaries of the need for an editor or a publisher or a printer. I'll be looking forward to the next IPA Congress where I'm sure there will be a session on the consciousness in the publishing world. Until then, keep publishing. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the entire organizing committee. And I now have the pleasure of requesting Mr. N.K. Mehra to kindly share his thoughts with us.
As we come to the close of this conference, I had said to myself, while on the first day everyone is saying, well done, and I said to myself, and I think I said it openly also, that if at the end of the day, which is the third day, people, friends, publishers, colleagues can still say, well done, I'd be very happy. And I'm sorry I'm being emotional, but I thank you all for being here, for being with us, and making this a success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mehra. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to share with you all that my primary occupation is a wedding planner. I organize and plan weddings for a living. So this moment, as you can see from Mr. Mehra's teared eyes, is the moment when the father is saying goodbye to the daughter. So I'm sure you're having the same feelings. So with that, I'd like to thank the entire organizing committee, and we now move on to the next part of the valedictory function and the closing ceremony. May I invite on stage, amidst your applause, put your hands together for Dr. Michael Coleman, IPA President. Mr. Hugo Setzer, IPA Vice President, Chair, IPA Congress Programming Committee. May I request for applause, please? We already have with us on stage Mr. Ashok K. Ghosh, FIP, Chairman Organizing Committee, IPA Congress 2018. I now take the pleasure of requesting Dr. Michael Coleman, IPA President, to address the August gathering. Well, I got swayed with the emotions. So the IPA would also like to thank the Federation of Indian Publishers. We already have with us on stage Mr. N.K. Mehra and Mr. Ashok K. Ghosh. And I now invite on stage Dr. Ashok Gupta. Shri Naveen Gupta. So may I request Dr. Coleman to kindly present mementos to the FIP. The IPA would like to thank the FIP for their contribution. We'd like to thank Shri N.K. Mehra. The IPA would like to thank Shri N.K. Mehra. Our thanks to Shri Naveen Gupta. Our sincere thanks to Mr. N.K. Mehra. The IPA would like to thank Shri Ashok K. Ghosh. And now I take the pleasure of inviting Dr. Coleman to kindly do us the honors of presenting a memento to Mr. R.K. Mittal. May I request Dr. Coleman to kindly present a memento to Mr. Pranav Gupta. The IPA would like to thank Ms. Monica Malhotra Kandhari. Once again, thankful to the entire organizing committee of FIP. May I request Mr. Ashok K. Ghosh to kindly stay back with us for the closing ceremony. I now take the pleasure of inviting to take the center stage and address the audience, Dr. Michael Coleman.
Well, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. If Mr. Mira is the father of the bride, I'm not so sure what I am, but I'm extremely happy about the Congress here. So thank you for sticking with us right to the end. The 32nd International Publishers Congress has been jam-packed with fascinating panels, and I have enjoyed the opportunity to get to meet and talk to so many of you during all the sessions. There has been an awful lot to take in, and let me just share a couple of the moments that struck me most and that made this Congress for me very memorable. For me, the buzzword from day one of the Congress was disruption. And of course, we could not talk about disruption without talking about big tech. There were many great angles here. Are the big tech companies the biggest publishers? Can we educate them on copyright? I could feel the tension around embracing technology and disruption, and the worry, perhaps, of heading in the unknown can provide. Let's work together in disrupting the disruptor, I would say. In the light of that talk of disruption, it was great to hear from both WIPO and the Indian government to declare not their firm commitment to copyright, but also to our industry. Such strong support should make all of us confident going forward that the foundations of our industry are understood by policymakers. And when it comes to freedom of expression and freedom to publish, three phenomenal women touched us all, I think, in a very profound way. Jennifer Clement, Angela Guili, and Razia Ramanjoli really hit home the responsibility we have as publishing community to those freedom to publish champions. I think all of us agree the award ceremony was a powerful evening that really put into context why freedom to publish stands as a solid pillar alongside copyright to our work. I've heard so much confidence about our industry here. I opened this Congress calling on you, on all of us, to use this Congress to get on the front foot. Let's use that confidence to do exactly that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to the next speaker, our Vice President, Hugo Setzer.
Thank you, Michiel. Good afternoon, everyone. When I was on my way, traveling, coming here to Delhi, I had to make a stopover in Toronto airport. And there I was in Toronto, standing in line to board my plane to Delhi. And then two elderly American women approached me and started a conversation with me. And they were telling me about their purpose of their visit here to India. And then they looked at me and asked, "And what about you? Are you going home?" And I have to say, I would like to say that thanks to the wonderful hospitality of all of FIP's team, I feel at home here. Thank you very much. Michiel is absolutely right. This has been an amazing Congress. I'd like to pick up some of the points he has just made, and we have also one big announcement still to come. So after that little teaser, let me just take a quick moment to thank everyone who has made this fantastic event happen. I know we have had a lot of thank yous, but it's never enough to thank the people who have been working to make this happen. I would like to thank, and please help me give a round of applause when I finish this first part, to the programming committee who brought this lineup together. Ashok Ghosh, Bodur Al-Qasimi, Brian Murray, Brian Vafavarova, Emma House, Jessica Senger, Kristen Einarsson, Mingzhou Zhang, Paul Doda, and Trasvin Jititecharak. I would also like to thank our chairs and speakers of the sessions who have kept us interested right to the end. Another big thanks to our friends and colleagues of the Federation of Indian Publishers, Narendra Mehra, Ashok Ghosh, Naveen Gupta, Ashok Gupta, Pranav Gupta, Ramesh Mittal, Monica Malhotra, and the rest of all the wonderful FIP team. A special thanks as well to Mr. Pradeep Chabra, with whom he had to withstand a telephone conversation almost every week with me. He has been working a lot behind the scenes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chabra. Thank our sponsors for helping us make this Congress happen. I would also like to thank Ms. Mandeep Varma, our Master of Ceremonies, who has kept proceedings moving so nicely. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the technical team at the back of the room and the hotel staff, particularly Mr. Nitin Gori. Thank you. Finally, thank you, Michiel, for your support and leadership, and thanks to the IPA Secretariat, Jose, Joanna, and James, as well as Benjamin, Rachel, and George, who have supported Michiel and myself. Thanks to all of you. Michiel just closed calling us to get on to the front foot. For us to do that, we need to work together, to collaborate. And that is what IPA is for. We had a session on bringing publishing markets together, and that means bringing people together, whether it's at this Congress, a book fair, or elsewhere. And it's not just about the panels, about the interesting discussions we heard on the panels. They were absolutely fantastic. But it's also about to do with the discussions alongside, the networking, the opportunity to meet people from everywhere around the world. We have heard many times about the social and economic importance of our work, the value of publishing. Within this room, I heard a compelling case for the value of our industry, our contribution to literacy, education, employment, the economy, and functioning democracies. We need to take that message beyond these walls, to your national governments and to international bodies like the World International Property Organization. Michiel also mentioned the moving award ceremony yesterday evening. Our work on freedom to publish must be incessant. The testimonies we heard yesterday demonstrated that publishing and freedom to publish is about real people and sharing ideas and knowledge for the betterment of society. We must carry that torch. I would echo Angela Gui's remarks last night as we leave and look to the future. Let us cultivate our garden together. On that note, it seems fitting that I announce the destination of the next International Publishers Congress. The 33rd International Publishers Congress will be held in 2020 in Lillehammer in Norway. And as tradition would have it, I have here the IPA flag handed over to Mr. Mehra in London. It gives me great pleasure to invite Christian Einarsson, Managing Director of the Norwegian Publishers Association, to the stage. Please, Mr. Einarsson, if you... And I would like to ask my dear friend Ashok Ghosh to do us the honors to hand over the flag to Mr. Einarsson. Thank you. Thank you.
The place we are going next Congress is called Lillehammer. So I had to say something for Lillehammer and why you all should go. One of the most important book in India is Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And we all have read Gita, and we have read many commentary on Gita. And in Srimad Bhagavad Gita, it is written that when we die, then our soul travels to cosmos and go to the heaven. And the soul takes a route. It is given in Gita, one of the verses, that from here, when I die, then my soul will go and travel to where? It will go to Lillehammer, because that is the place, Norway. So it goes straight to Norway, and from Norway, it travels to North Pole, through North Pole, to cosmos, and that is beyond here in heaven. So it is the heaven when we will be going next time when we go to Lillehammer. So that is a very good thing. There is a shortcut, and as I told them, those who will be reaching Lillehammer, they will be in heaven, and those who will stuck in Oslo, that is hell. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
I didn't know that we had such a short way to heaven. Or hell. First of all, I would also like to congratulate the Federation of Indian Publishers and IPA on this Congress here in Delhi in India. And as we are going to move on, the Norwegian PA is looking forward to have you all as our guests in the small town of Lillehammer in Norway in the end of the last week of May 2020. So make a note on your calendar, last week of May 2020. There will probably still be snow in the mountains surrounding Lillehammer, so if you want to ski, you can do that. But in Lillehammer, it will be a vibrant literature scene, because the biggest Norwegian Literature Festival is arranged in Lillehammer just when we have the Congress. So we will have a great blend of readers, authors, and publishers in town. The Norwegian Minister of Culture wanted to come here but was unable to join us, but she has recorded a welcome message to all of the IPA's members. So please join us in Lillehammer in May 2020. Lillehammer is a UNESCO City of Literature.
In 2019, Norway will be the guest of honor in the Frankfurt Book Fair. This is a unique opportunity to promote Norwegian literature and culture abroad. When the opportunity came to host the International Publisher Congress in 2020, the Norwegian Publisher Association saw it as a great opportunity to bring the publisher of the world to our country. A few weeks ago, my party joined the coalition that forms the Norwegian government. I am excited to be the new Minister of Culture, and as a passionate reader, I'm looking forward to the cooperation with the publisher industry. The success for Norwegian literature outside our country is, of course, due to great authors that write great literature. However, it's also important that the authors are able to develop their talent, are connected with the readers, and for a small country like Norway, author needs support and consistent government policy. We will continue to support art in all its diversity. We are excited to welcome you all to Lillehammer, the City of Literature in 2020.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Norway. And as Mr. Ghosh said, if Oslo is hell, Lillehammer is heaven. I can tell you that Delhi is a bit of both on different days. I'm sure all of you agree. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to bid goodbye to all of you. Thank you once again for being a part of this International Congress. And I really enjoyed being a part of this Congress. Thank you for all the appreciation, all the love that you all have showered on me. And I would like to thank Mr. Naveen Gupta as well as Mr. Pranav Gupta. And of course, how can I forget Mr. Mittal? Mr. Mittal was my first point of contact. And this morning only, Mr. Ghosh was asking me, who's your friend amongst us all? And I said I might have been introduced by my dear friend, Mr. Mittal, but now I have all of you as friends. On that note, I'd like to say thank you and have a very great evening. But don't forget to join us, because today evening as well, we have a scintillating cultural evening. There is Kathak Kendra, which is going to present the Indian traditional form of Kathak, and which will be followed by a cultural show by the Song and Drama Division of the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, which will end in the grand finale, wherein we have a Bhangra. Bhangra now is a very energetic dance form, and I'm sure that you're all set to enjoy this evening. So once again, thanking all the dignitaries who have joined us on the dais. We would like you to please stay back, enjoy the drinks while we prepare the stage for the cultural presentation, and stay back for the dinner. We hope you enjoyed. Thank you.
Just a minute, Mandeep ma'am. Before we start our cultural program, we just wish to say thanks to Mandeep ma'am, who has conducted this program for 3 days in a wonderful way. May I request Monica ji to just honor her with a present of shawl.
May I request Mr. Mittal to please join us?
Yeah, she wants Mr. Mittal also. Pranav also, ma'am? Pranav also?
Thank you so much for all the love that you've shared with me. Thank you. May I request for the stage to be made ready? Could I have the team working on the stage, please?